Podcast debates can get intense, but sometimes a simple disagreement turns into something that has the entire internet talking. And that's exactly what happened during a recent moment on the Joe Budden podcast. What started as a regular conversation quickly shifted into a tense exchange that fans did not see coming. Voices got sharper, opinions got stronger, and suddenly the atmosphere felt completely different. At the center of it all was Emanny. During the discussion, Emanny made it clear that he wasn't backing down from his opinion. Even as the debate grew more heated, he continued standing firmly behind what he had already said earlier in the show's Rewind segment. But things really escalated when both Joe Budden and Ice began challenging his take. At first, it seemed like the kind of back and forth that happens on podcasts all the time. But the longer the conversation continued, the more intense it became. Fans watching the clip began noticing the shift in energy almost immediately. Suddenly, it wasn't just a debate anymore. It felt personal. Viewers started asking questions online. Was this just another passionate discussion between friends? Or did something deeper happen behind the scenes? Because if there's one thing fans know about the Joe Budden podcast, it's that when strong personalities clash, things can go from entertaining to explosive in seconds. And this particular moment might be one of the most talked about debates the podcast has seen in a long time. Because if there's one thing fans know about the Joe Budden podcast, it's that when strong personalities collide, ordinary debates can quickly spiral into full-blown drama. And that's exactly what happened when Emanny refused to back down, even as both Joe Budden and Ice tried to challenge him. The conversation began casually. At first, it seemed like a normal Rewind segment discussion, a moment to revisit hot topics, give personal takes, and add a little spice for the fans. But something about the way Emanny delivered his opinion immediately set a different tone. His voice carried conviction, sharpness, and confidence. Listeners could sense it before anyone even noticed. This wasn't going to be just another podcast debate. Ice chimed in first. His usual style, cool, measured, a bit teasing, suddenly carried an edge. He challenged Emanny's viewpoint point by point, dissecting every argument, every phrasing. The energy shifted. It was no longer a casual discussion. It was a confrontation, subtle but charged. The viewers felt it, the co-hosts felt it, and suddenly everyone knew the stakes had risen. Joe Budden entered next. With his signature intensity, he questioned Emanny's assumptions, probing for inconsistencies and pushing boundaries. His tone wasn't just argumentative, it was interrogative, almost like a chess master trying to predict the next move. Emanny, however, didn't flinch. Each pushback was met with calm but unyielding counterpoints. The tension in the studio was palpable, and even the casual observer could sense the electricity in the air. Fans watching the live stream immediately started noticing. Comments began flooding in, noting the shift from a simple Rewind segment to a heated clash. Emanny is not backing down, one viewer wrote. Another commented, Joe and Ice are not letting him off easy. Within minutes, clips began circulating across Twitter and Instagram, drawing more eyes to a moment that was already spiraling out of control. It wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a battle of personalities. Emanny's delivery was precise, intentional, and unwavering. Every word seemed calculated, every pause deliberate. He wasn't just defending his take, he was staking his ground, challenging the authority of the co-hosts without showing a hint of doubt. Meanwhile, Ice and Joe were doubling down. The tension built like a storm. Each rebuttal was sharper than the last, each reaction more loaded with emotion and implication. The conversation wasn't just about the original topic. Anymore, it was about respect, credibility, and dominance on one of the most influential platforms in hip-hop media. As the back and forth continued, viewers could almost feel the silent calculations behind every word. Emanny seemed to anticipate Joe's next line before it even came, pivoting expertly and throwing counterarguments that left both co-hosts momentarily caught off guard. It was a display of verbal agility, but also a high-stakes power play. Fans started dissecting the moment frame by frame. Clips circulated showing Emanny's calm demeanor contrasted against Joe's rising frustration and Ice's subtle smirks. Social media erupted with debates about who was winning the exchange. Some praised Emanny for his boldness, calling him fearless and strategic. Others sided with Joe and Ice, arguing that they were right to challenge him and test his credibility. But what truly made the moment unforgettable wasn't just the argument, it was the unspoken tension, the energy that hung heavy in the air like a storm about to break. The viewers could feel it, the co-hosts could feel it, and anyone watching the clip later could almost imagine the silence between the words, the sharp glances, the pauses where the room seemed to hold its breath. As the rewind segment progressed, Emanny's points became sharper. He doubled down on controversial statements, knowing they would provoke Joe and Ice. Each rebuttal carried a weight, forcing the co-hosts to respond not just with logic, but with emotion. And that emotional response only added fuel to the fire. By the midpoint of the segment, the debate had transformed into something more than a discussion. It had become a performance, a high-stakes battle of wits, influence, and public perception. Every sentence carried implications for the personalities involved. Every reaction was a signal to the audience. This is serious, this is tense, and this is one of the most memorable clashes in recent podcast history. Fans online were no longer passive observers. They were participants in the unfolding drama. Comments, memes, and reaction clips multiplied at a dizzying pace. Every nuance, every facial expression, every pause was analyzed, creating a feedback loop that only heightened the intensity. What happened in the studio didn't stay in the studio. It spread, amplified by the digital ecosystem of instant reactions. By the end of the segment, it was clear that something extraordinary had occurred. Emanny had not backed down once. Joe Budden had pressed harder than usual. Ice had maintained his edge throughout. And the internet had already begun labeling the exchange as one of the most intense moments in recent JP history. Yet, despite all the drama, the story was far from over. Social media speculation continued to grow, suggesting that what viewers had seen was only a glimpse of deeper tensions and stronger dynamics at play behind the scenes. Fans began asking, was this just the surface of Emanny's strategy? Was Joe holding back his true response? And what role did Ice really play in this heated dynamic? The first part of the story ends with these questions lingering in the air. The storm was building and the world was watching. Everyone knew that the next installment, the reactions, the follow-ups, the consequences, would determine who truly came out on top. Because in the world of hip-hop media, moments like these don't fade quietly. They explode, reverberate, and leave their mark on everyone involved. And as the viewers continued to debate, clip, and analyze the exchange, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't just a heated podcast segment. It was the beginning of a story that could define reputations, alliances, and influence in the community for months to come. The storm had only just begun. As soon as the rewind segment ended, clips of the heated exchange between Emanny, Joe Budden, and Ice began circulating online. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted, with fans dissecting every second of the segment. Every pause, every glance, every emphatic word was analyzed, replayed, and debated. At first, reactions were mixed. Some praised Emanny for his unshakable composure, pointing out how he maintained control even when Joe and Ice pressed him from every angle. "He's fearless," one viewer wrote, literally unmoved while Joe and Ice are firing everything they've got. Others felt Joe had the upper hand, noting his intensity, precision, and ability to dominate the conversation when it came to rhetoric and storytelling. Ice, too, received attention for his subtle, cutting interjections, those sly remarks that hit hard without ever appearing confrontational. But beneath the surface, something deeper was unfolding. This wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a battle for credibility, influence, and respect. Each participant understood the stakes. They knew that millions of viewers were watching, recording, and sharing. And in the era of viral media, a single misstep could be magnified into controversy overnight. Fans quickly realized that what happened in the segment might not have been entirely spontaneous. Some speculated that Emanny's calm, measured delivery suggested months of preparation, or at least a keen understanding of how Joe and Ice operate. Others thought Joe's intensity, his rapid-fire rebuttals, reflected his experience dealing with challenging personalities on air. Ice, meanwhile, played the perfect foil, calm yet cutting, measuring his responses like a strategist waiting for the right moment to strike. By the next morning, hashtags referencing the segment were trending. Clips had racked up millions of views across platforms. Reaction videos popped up on YouTube and TikTok, each offering a new interpretation of the exchange. Fans argued endlessly in the comments section. Who won? Who had the most compelling argument? And perhaps most importantly, who would respond next? The debate didn't just stay online, it spilled into mainstream media coverage. Blogs and entertainment sites picked up the story, framing the clash as a defining moment in recent Joe Budden podcast history. Analysts wrote think pieces examining the rhetorical strategies of each participant, comparing Emanny's measured calm to Joe's fiery confrontations and Ice's precise commentary. Social media users dissected the scene frame by frame, highlighting subtle micro-expressions, pauses, and tonal shifts. And yet, amidst all the speculation and analysis, the participants themselves remained mostly silent, at least publicly. Emanny did not post a single comment. Joe Budden refrained from sharing his own perspective beyond the segment, and Ice maintained his usual composed presence on social media. This silence only intensified the speculation, leaving fans to fill in the blanks with theories, conjectures, and wild guesses. Some of the more observant commentators noticed subtle patterns in Emanny's delivery that suggested he was deliberately controlling the narrative. Every pause, every carefully chosen word seemed designed to provoke, challenge, and yet stay within the bounds of respect. Joe's responses, while intense, occasionally betrayed frustration. He was grappling with someone who refused to play by the usual rules of debate. Ice's interjections, sharp but understated, provided a counterbalance, keeping the segment from tipping into outright chaos while still maintaining tension. As hours turned into days, the story continued to evolve. Fans began speculating about behind-the-scenes dynamics, questions about what was said off-camera, the planning leading up to the segment, and whether alliances existed between the participants. Some theories suggested that Emanny had prepared extensively to hold his ground, predicting how Joe and Ice would respond. Others proposed that Joe and Ice were deliberately testing Emanny, pushing him to see whether he would crack under pressure. Every interpretation added another layer of drama, and the internet couldn't get enough. Memes, reaction GIFs, and commentary videos flooded every platform. The segment became more than just a podcast discussion. It became a cultural event, a lesson in strategy, timing, and psychological warfare in real time. Fans debated for hours about the implications of each statement, each glance, and each micro-expression. Meanwhile, within the fan base, factions emerged. Some supported Emanny, praising his composure, intelligence, and refusal to back down. Others sided with Joe Budden, admiring his commanding presence and rhetorical mastery. A smaller group highlighted Ice's contributions, recognizing his subtle but effective role in escalating tension without losing control. These divisions fueled ongoing discussion, creating a feedback loop of analysis, speculation, and fan-driven narrative building. The most fascinating aspect, however, was how the drama extended beyond the immediate personalities involved. Fans started applying the tension from the segment to broader cultural conversations about influence, authority, and credibility in hip-hop media. People debated how public figures should handle criticism, whether measured calm or passionate intensity was more effective, and what it meant for a contributor like Emanny to assert himself against two of the most respected voices on the show. As the discussion unfolded, it became clear that the stakes were higher than anyone realized. What had started as a single podcast segment now had the potential to define public perceptions of all three participants for months. Clips were being referenced in subsequent episodes, reaction videos referenced prior moments, and debates spilled into live-stream discussions across platforms. The segment had created its own ecosystem, a narrative loop that kept audiences engaged and invested in real-time analysis. In short, this was more than a simple debate. It was a test of strategy, influence, and endurance under pressure. Emanny's willingness to hold his ground, Joe Budden's relentless probing, and ICE's precise interventions combined to create a moment that transcended ordinary podcast banter. And the consequences were just beginning to surface. Even after the segment ended, the narrative continued. Fans speculated on how each participant would act next. Would Emanny release a statement? Would Joe comment further or bring it up in a future episode? Would ICE weigh in with additional insight? These questions kept audiences returning, replaying clips, and dissecting every interaction for signs of future developments. The drama had achieved something remarkable. It had captured attention, commanded discussion, and set the stage for an ongoing narrative that fans could follow and participate in. And that is exactly what happens when personalities with strong convictions collide on a platform as influential as the Joe Budden podcast. By the end of this phase, the internet had decided. Emanny had made a statement that could not be ignored. He had doubled down, stood firm, and proven that he could compete intellectually and strategically with two of the most experienced voices in hip-hop media. And the world was watching. But the story was far from over. With the tension was electric. The stakes had risen. And the internet was fully invested. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was the beginning of a saga, a layered, high-stakes battle of influence, perception, and strategy that would keep fans hooked for weeks, maybe even months. Because when personalities like these collide, drama doesn't just happen. It evolves. It spreads. And it leaves an impact that lasts far beyond a single episode. The question lingered in the air like a charged current. What would the next move be? By now, the internet was fully ignited. Fans weren't just watching. They were dissecting, theorizing, and debating every moment of the exchange. Every subtle glance, every choice of word, every pause was being scrutinized as if it held the key to the next chapter in this unfolding drama. Social media exploded with clips labeled Emanny versus Joe Budden ICE, and hashtags began trending across platforms. The conversation was no longer contained within the podcast's audience. It had spilled into mainstream culture. Reaction videos multiplied at lightning speed. Influencers, bloggers, and commentators replayed segments frame by frame, analyzing body language, tone, and strategic delivery. Some argued Emanny's calm composure demonstrated mastery, a strategic brilliance that Joe and ICE weren't fully prepared for. Others insisted Joe's relentless intensity and ICE's calculated interjections showcased the true power of seasoned debate veterans, suggesting that Emanny, while impressive, was still outmatched in experience. Yet beneath the fan theories and commentary, a deeper tension simmered. The moment was more than just a debate. It was a psychological chess match, a war of influence where credibility, perception, and reputation hung in the balance. Emanny had planted a marker. He had shown he could stand toe-to-toe with two of the most respected voices on the show. But the co-hosts were not passive participants. Joe's probing, almost interrogative style, tested Emanny at every turn, while ICE's subtle, almost surgical contributions ensured that the pressure never let up. As hours turned into days, the ramifications became clearer. Some industry insiders speculated that this moment could redefine the dynamics of the Joe Budden podcast forever. Clips were being used as examples in discussions about podcast strategy, debate tactics, and audience engagement. The segment had become a case study in how conflict, strategy, and personality collide in digital media. But what made this exchange truly captivating wasn't just the personalities, it was the timing. In today's viral ecosystem, a single moment can dominate conversations for weeks, influence public opinion, and even affect the trajectories of careers. Emanny's decision to double down had created a ripple effect, forcing both Joe and ICE into reactive positions, and the internet was watching every move. Fans speculated endlessly. Was Emanny's response calculated to shift audience perception? Was Joe planning a follow-up in the next episode to reclaim dominance? Would Ice drop subtle comments on social media to fuel the conversation further? The suspense kept viewers glued, replaying segments and sharing clips as if participating in the drama themselves. The psychological stakes were immense. Every participant understood that public perception mattered as much as the words themselves. In a platform where millions of eyes dissect your every move, even the smallest gesture can be magnified into a viral moment. The tension wasn't just in what was said, it was in how it was delivered, how it was received, and how the audience interpreted it. Then came the fan theories, wild, creative, and unrelenting. Some suggested behind-the-scenes alliances, implying that Emanny's calmness indicated private strategizing with producers or staff. Others proposed that Joe and Ice were intentionally pressing him to see if he would falter, testing his readiness to hold his ground under pressure. Social media became a chessboard with fans, assigning moves, motives, and intentions to every participant. Meanwhile, the podcast community continued dissecting the implications. Analysts highlighted the subtle power dynamics, Emanny's ability to assert himself without aggression, Joe's mastery of rhetorical pressure, and Ice's precise timing of interventions. Each perspective added layers to the story, demonstrating that this wasn't just a clash of opinions, it was a lesson in control, strategy, and influence. And then the story expanded. Clips from this segment began appearing in unrelated podcasts, reaction videos, and news outlets, amplifying the reach and creating new angles for discussion. Fans who had never watched the original Rewind segment were now fully invested, commenting, theorizing, and anticipating the next episode. The ripple effect was massive. The narrative had evolved into something much larger than a single podcast debate. It became a cultural touchpoint, an example of how personality, strategy, and audience perception intertwine in modern media. Emanny's bold stance had triggered a series of reactions, forcing the co-hosts into positions they might not have anticipated and igniting a wave of fan engagement that showed no signs of slowing. By the end of this phase, it was clear. The story had reached a critical turning point. Emanny had proven he could hold his ground, Joe had demonstrated his relentless challenge style, and Ice had showcased the power of subtle influence. Fans had become active participants, dissecting, theorizing, and building a narrative that extended far beyond the studio walls. And yet, even as the dust seemed to settle, one unspoken question remained. What comes next? Would Emanny release statements or content to reinforce his stance? Would Joe or Ice respond in the next podcast episode, continuing the intellectual duel? Would the audience's interpretation shape future dynamics between them? The possibilities were endless, and the suspense was electric. This final part of the saga serves as a reminder. In the age of digital media, moments of tension, strategy, and personality can transcend platforms, becoming shared experiences that captivate audiences worldwide. What began as a Rewind segment on a podcast had transformed into a story of influence, strategy, and reputation, illustrating the power of calculated composure in the face of pressure. In the end, the clash between Emanny, Joe Budden, and Ice wasn't just a debate, it was a